Hello, everybody. Welcome to the United Stands. I'm Mark Goldbridge, and I'm joined with Ben Jacobs. How you doing, Ben? Merry Christmas.
Everything is good. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to everyone. We're both extraordinarily colourful.
I know. That's what Christmas is all about. And you're normally with us on a Thursday, but it's Christmas Day, so we've just decided to grab a quick recorded half an hour or so before getting on with our festivities. But the big news I want to start off with, Ben, is obviously Semenyo, which you led on for a while, saying that Man United were in for him. And I've got to say, I never felt like we were, not in the sense that I didn't agree with you, but it just always felt like, why are we not going for a midfielder? What's the latest with that? Because we're not getting him now, but United have played a hand again, like they did with Baleba, that they clearly have money. They normally say we haven't got any money. They clearly have got some money. Do you think they're now going to go and spend that on another attacker or a midfielder? Because that's going to be what most United fans are going to want to know.
Yeah, it's all about Manchester United allocating their summer budget. So yes, if the right target's available in January, they would do business. But if it's a quiet window, I think it's an indication that the summer planning is kind of in place. And therefore, it's not necessarily doom and gloom, because if they don't sign someone, from my understanding, it's not down to budget. It does help them in some ways, if we're being brutally honest, doing the business July 1st onwards, because then you move on from PSR to this new squad cost ratio. And in layman's terms, that means Man United have got more rope to work with. But I think it's about being discerning and making sure that if money is somewhat tight, depending on if they do or don't get Champions League football, they don't waste it. So Semenyo was of appeal because he was a player for the long run. He was viewed as a starter. He was versatile. I'm led to believe that it wasn't about converting him to a predominant left wing back, but the fact that he could have played for Manchester United in multiple positions was part of the motivation. And if we're being absolutely honest, that is the kind of saga that you have to do in January, because if you don't, you sit and watch another club get him. Other targets like Elliot Anderson or Adam Wharton or Carlos Baleba, they're going to be summer sagas, and Manchester United can wait. So now it's going to be about deciding, is there the right midfielder available in January? And if there is, then I would expect them to do some business. And if they can do a loan, of course, they can have their Christmas cake and eat it, and then decide whether they're going to keep that player or do two others during the summer. So I think that will be going through their head at the moment. But I think January for Manchester United can be summarised as no panic buys. And then if they can move forward some of that summer budget, they will. And if they can't, then it adds more pressure for the summer. But then if nobody comes in January, I do expect a serious midfield revamp, because that's the number one priority, and that's clear. And I think everyone is on the same page in that respect.
With regards to the targets in place in the summer, I think it was David Ornstein was saying about Elliot Anderson. Obviously, you've mentioned Carlos Baleba and Adam Wharton there. I suppose from my perspective, and I think a lot of United fans would agree, this Semenyo story is almost where a new world for Manchester United. I mean, as bad as things have been under the Glazers, if they go public on a signing, you normally get them. But we're seeing an increasing change with that. Liam Delap last summer, obviously the Baleba story, and now Semenyo choosing Manchester City. I suppose the fear is that, some people will get very excited that Elliot Anderson's a top priority, but there's no reason to think that we wouldn't be in the same position again, where we're not the most attractive option and he just chooses Man City. And I suppose the fear is that if we don't do anything in the midfield in January and we wait for those big targets in the summer, you're probably going to end up with the similar targets you could have gone for in January anyway, as per people like Ruben Neves, Conor Gallagher.
Yeah, I think they've got several targets, though, because they want two. So one's a defined six, the other's more a box-to-box midfielder. And I do think they'll have the budget. And I know with Semenyo, the sort of official club line, if you like, at least from people I speak to, is Manchester United were not prepared to break their wage structure. There may be exceptions, especially if the players are younger and there's heavy competition. And the other thing in all of this is that there's just two kinds of players. So Liam Delap would potentially have joined Manchester United had they got Champions League football by winning the Europa League final against Spurs. But the reason why he wanted it right away is because it's a World Cup year. It's all a bit redundant because unfortunately he's picked up a few injuries. He is going to be back, by the way, for the Villa game, but it doesn't look like he's a front runner to necessarily make that squad, but you never know. But you can understand why a young player like that would say, I want it immediately, because otherwise you've got to wait 4 years until the next World Cup. Then you have other players that say, I only want a particular club. And in the case of Cunha and Mbeumo, it was Manchester United. And that's because of the history, the prestige, the fan base, and ultimately the project potential. I think Semenyo falls a bit more into the Delap category because he's 25 years of age. So somebody telling him, wait 3 years for the project to come to fruition, he may be saying, I'm going to be looking over my shoulder. I'm going to be 28 years of age. I might not be a starter at that point. If your 3-year project takes 5 years, I might leave the club without any significant silverware or Champions League experience. And players have to think about that doomsday scenario, even if right now the project may be pitched as being on track. You move to Man City, you play immediately under Pep. It's likely you get silverware immediately. You're playing in the Champions League in the second half of the season. I don't think, coming back to your point about other midfielders, Carlos Baleba and Elliot Anderson fall into that category. They're younger. They've not known this long-standing silverware or European football. They're prepared to wait. And if we're being brutally honest, if you're under the age of 24, you can go and move to any top club and then still get another move if you're playing well and the club project isn't on track. So I think Manchester United are less fearful that Elliot Anderson, for example, is going to turn around and say no to Manchester United solely because they don't have Champions League football, if that's the scenario that emerges next season. And then who they might go for, I think Anderson is right up there, and the same can still be said for Carlos Baleba. Angelo Stiller is a market opportunity if his release clause is still active. Conor Gallagher, Ruben Neves, maybe you get a loan, especially with Conor Gallagher, but Atleti's stance would have to change. With Ruben Neves, it's still quite a big outlay because he's a free transfer in the summer. Right now, Al Hilal, if they sell, want £50 million. That's a lot of money. But again, if you're Man United, you may say Ruben Neves on a free transfer could, in one scenario, allow 3 midfielders to come in because Bruno Fernandes, in one hypothetical, could be sold. Casemiro could not be extended. Kobbie Mainoo could go in some capacity by the summer. And then you're looking and saying, we'll take 1 free transfer and we'll invest in 2 midfielders. So I think the plan is 2 elite midfielders and to hang on to some of the names that I've mentioned. But maybe there is a scenario where a market opportunity offers you a free transfer and you say, why not? And this is why I think there's so many names in the mix. But again, there's those 2 category of players, and not each of the names that are going to be summer targets and highly competitive will necessarily be going all in on immediate silverware or immediate Champions League football.
Let's just park that for a moment. I've just got a couple of things I wanted to ask you about it, but you did mention Mainoo there. It's been a very interesting week. We had sort of tentative stuff at the weekend that Mainoo didn't know about the T-shirt stuff. And we've obviously had conversations, and I've heard what you've said on social media. I've heard what other people said. But I'd almost park that because I know you did the show with Beth last week, and we had a couple of people saying, well, Ben Jacobs needs to apologise then because he said he knew about it. But I was like, nothing really came out from the weekend from anybody credible. And Mainoo certainly didn't say anything credible about it. It was more like opinion pieces. He then misses the game completely against Aston Villa with a calf strain. Bruno Fernandes gets injured. It's been a right roller coaster. I think at times it was like, he's definitely going to be going on January the 1st. There's no way back. Then there's the Bruno injury. Then there's the weird injury to him. I mean, I've said, I'll say it again here. If he starts against Newcastle, there was no way he had a calf strain on against Villa. You don't miss a game completely on a Sunday and then start on Friday. So I wait to see what the latest is with the injury. But what's your latest understanding with the situation? Because I think we can all agree, Ben, there's nobody really can put their finger on it. I mean, Mainoo could be genuinely injured. He could have been on the bench and pulled out completely. Amorim might be saying he's injured, but punished him with a game out. You know, there's all sorts of theories. But where do you think we are with the Mainoo situation and Man United? Because some people feel Bruno's out. He could play now.
Yeah, and I think in simple terms, if he's fit, that's absolutely right. And I don't think Manuel Ugarte necessarily did enough in the last game to say to Ruben Amorim, if Kobbie Mainoo is fit, that he's going to keep his place above Bruno Fernandes. So injury-wise, we have to take that at face value. Fans may speculate lots of different conspiracy theories, but he's got a calf injury and it was enough to miss the last game. Let's wait and see if he's back in the fold for the next one. I think in his last press conference, Ruben Amorim said he might need another game out. sometimes when players have unspecified knocks, and we're talking broadly now, it can be in the build up to the window just to protect them. So you say it's either a technical decision or they've got a knock and we're not sharing any more. And that is code for we don't want this player playing because we might sell them in the window. In this case, I think we've got a specific injury. There's an urgent need for a player like Kobbie Mainoo to be involved because of the Bruno Fernandes situation. And my understanding, therefore, is that injury is genuine. And the reason for that is because, remember, in all of this, it's not Man United saying, we want to sell him, we want that pure profit. It's Kobbie Mainoo asking to leave for game time, and ideally on a loan, because he would love it to work at Manchester United. It just isn't. And you can wait and wait and wait. And there's two junctures to wait. The first is obviously beginning of the season, and he left it all window before reluctantly saying, can I have a move away? Very firm answer, no. Second window is the festive period, because it's like the one time in this Manchester United season when it's a bit more like European football in the sense that there are 2 games a week. So if in this period a fit Mainoo doesn't play, then of course he's going to turn around again and say, I'm asking for the second time, can I leave? And I think if Man United say no again, which is very possible now, Bruno Fernandes is out potentially for up to a month. If it gets to the summer and he has to ask a third time, can I go? Then that will likely be the end of it, because the club can't keep saying, wait, be patient, you'll get opportunities. And if an entire season has passed, and this is why Pep Guardiola is so understanding of his players like Cole Palmer that asked to leave. But 9 times out of 10 in that scenario, the player asked multiple times. So coming back to the transfer part first, and then we can speak about the T-shirt, my understanding remains that Mainoo would like Napoli. He'd like to go on a loan. He'd like to do what Rasmus Højlund is doing and set Sarriá on fire, and then return and say to Manchester United, don't make the same mistake you made with Scott McTominay. Look how well I've done. Give me an opportunity. And then it could go to the complete other extreme. And
maybe with a different manager.
Yeah, but we'll have to see. But I think Ruben Amorim will back Mainoo if he sees that maturity off the ball. And he's young. And because of the hype, and because of what he did in the previous season, and because he was playing for England in a major final, we forget how young he is, and there's loads of room for development. So I don't think this is bridge burning, end of the road. I think Mainoo, as a player, is making a very reasonable request that he wants to play either for Man United or somewhere else. And if it's somewhere else, he's saying to the club, I'm not asking to leave, I'm asking to play, and then I'll come back. And obviously, Ruben Amorim has been fighting for his job in recent months and has a slightly different perspective, that he wants players he perceives are ready for the now and are very effective off the ball. And I don't think he feels he's getting that from Kobbie Mainoo at the moment. As for the T-shirt, I think it's just worth saying again, as journalists, we have to stand by our reporting. And my understanding remains exactly what I've said before. I know it's not popular when you have a liked academy product to seemingly be saying something negative against a player. And I also know it's very easy to believe the neat, polished version that gives a player plausible deniability. And in no way am I saying Mainoo isn't trading hard, and in no way am I saying that he's causing any problems, because when he's on a football field, he has his head down, he's a model professional, he's liked. But you don't have a family member stand in a stadium and show a T-shirt and blindside the player entirely. So nobody's saying Mainoo was in a room concocting this and approving the message at the time and saying, do it at this particular hour and make sure a photographer's there. There's always going to be plausible deniability, which is why if Mainoo wants to come out, he can turn around and say, I knew nothing about it. But my information is still that he didn't know about the T-shirt. And as has been reported on TalkSport by Andy Goldstein, there were posts on social media that Mainoo was liking. And I verified that to also be the case. So some people are sort of going, there's no proof he liked it. There was a like of a story, which is only seen by the person that posts the story. And then Andy Goldstein went on
did he
TalkSport
confirm
and
that? Did
said
he?
it was live.
All right. And it's funny because we had a couple of people on the show. Somebody actually did a super chat, and I said, I don't know whether that's true or not, and you have to be very, very careful. But there was a few people who did mention that. So yeah, I didn't even know that officially had been said. But I think you're right though, Ben. I think it's that I stuck up for Mainoo the day after, and I said, look, it's when his brother does it. At that time, I didn't even know if he was close to his brother because it's his half brother. So you might not speak to him. But I think as the time went on, and Mainoo didn't come out and say it's nothing to do with me, because the players are very active on Instagram. That they'll comment on a movie. He put that picture out with his drums, didn't he? So I was like, when he didn't come out and say, it's nothing to do with me, I think that is, silence speaks volumes. But it's not as severe for me that if he played against Newcastle and played really well, I'd still feel justified in going, this is why I think Amorim should have given him a bit more game time over the last 4 months. So I suppose the big thing with Mainoo will be Amorim saying all the right things, but as we know with these players, he called them entitled, didn't he? Some of the younger players. It's whether, I felt with Rashford last year, there was no coming back anyway. He'd sort of, but he wasn't interested in, rekindling it with Amorim, and players do talk. And my concern is that Mainoo might just shut it down and be like, no, I don't want to play for this manager, which is going to make the January transfer window very interesting, because if he's determined to go and United want to keep him, it becomes maybe more problematic. We might have more than T-shirts.
Yeah, I don't think that's in Mainoo's character directly, which again is why if you want to send a message, whether cryptic, whether unfortunate, whether not that well thought out, you want that plausible deniability. So Kobbie Mainoo is known to just turn up, train hard, be a model professional. He's never agitated to the point where he's caused a stir. It would largely be seen as out of character if he came and called the club out directly in any capacity, whether professionally or more of a personal jibe. But we know he's frustrated. And I think every Manchester United player in his position would be. And yet Ruben Amorim is looking at his midfield and saying, even if logically to every fan, Mainoo is the one that should come in, he wants to stick with Bruno Fernandes and Casemiro. And now we're sort of going to see the proof is in the pudding. And I think, obviously, if Amorim plays Mainoo and he's fit and he does really well, then every single person in the world outside of Man United, but in a positive way, is going to say, we told you so. It was obvious this was going to happen. How on earth didn't it happen sooner? And of course, if Mainoo comes in and doesn't do that well, then Amorim is in a really tricky position, because he'll then be asked football questions. He'll answer them honestly. And if he comes into the side and then is removed from the side and replaced by Agate, it creates a really interesting dynamic. And I think this is basically why Mainoo has to play, because if he's not playing, everything remains unspoken. And with Bruno Fernandes injured, Manchester United are probably not going to engage with anybody. If he comes in and plays and does well, then the player's going to be like, great, I'm playing, I've earned my place, I don't want to go to Napoli on loan anymore. And Manchester United are going to go, brilliant, because we were never going to sanction an exit anyway. If he came in and didn't play that well and then was replaced, he's going to double down on wanting to leave in January. And then do Manchester United, if another midfielder becomes available, actually go, well, you know what? You had a run of games in the side. It didn't quite work. We are actually going to let you go and see if you can find a bit more consistency elsewhere. So the worst thing for all parties is just Mainoo isn't involved, or Mainoo remains injured, because then Man United's position won't change, Mainoo's position won't change, and the tension will just build. So whether he succeeds or fails, I think he has to play.
Do you think that parks the going back to like Semenyo, the money, when he's not here? So if there's going to be any incomings in January, it's probably a midfielder. Do you think, with regards to Mainoo leaving and a midfielder coming in, based on what you've said there, logically Bruno's probably not going to be back till the back half of January? Nothing's probably going to happen in the first few weeks in that midfield, because it's more about Mainoo having an opportunity and seeing if you need to get a midfielder later on. Yeah,
and that's the beauty of the window, that you can get through all the festive fixtures and you've still basically got 2 weeks left of the window. So I think if Kobbie Mainoo was to get a move, it might come late in January. And I think Man United, from people I speak to, have said to Mainoo before he picked up the calf injury, just wait through the festive fixtures. And this was before Bruno got injured, because you will get opportunities, and then see how you feel on kind of January the 14th. And that gives Man United time to scour the market, see if there are any opportunities, see if there's any surprise names they thought were only available in the summer that might become available, knowing that if they say yes, suddenly Mainoo can go on loan, it's going to be quite an easy negotiation. There's plenty of clubs that could do that deal very quickly. Everyone's done the legwork because Mainoo was speaking to some of these clubs during the summer. So I think Manchester United will control the timeline. And again, they will know that Mainoo has been a model professional on the football field. So I don't want to make a big deal of the T-shirt. I've reported what I've reported, but it's not about a kind of media whack job on a player. It's about saying it's out there. We've given the context. People can interpret it how they want. But Mainoo has moved on and Amorim has diffused the situation. So this is only now about football. It's not about the T-shirt. It's not about an underlying off-field problem. It's about Mainoo wanting game time. It's about Man United not wanting to lose any depth unless they can add somebody. And the other thing, of course, because we're recording this before Ruben Amorim has spoken and further tests are going to come back on Bruno Fernandes, we need to know his exact time scale out, which will be a piece of the puzzle. So up to a month, but let's see if it's a little bit less. It will depend on the severity of the injury. And we don't yet have that information because tests at the time we're recording this are still ongoing. And if for any reason Bruno Fernandes was back a bit earlier, then Kobbie Mainoo might make his decision to go back to Manchester United and ask to leave a bit earlier. So it's quite a fluid situation. But unless Mainoo starts playing, we're in exactly the same position as we were in the last week of the summer window. And Napoli in particular are the ones to watch. And I also think if it was to be a loan, that Manchester United would also, even though they don't want him to go at all, but if they are to sanction a loan, I think they would prefer that to be outside of the Premier League, because if he sets the world on fire for a rival, that's only going to make the situation worse.
If we were to sit here and say Man United are going to sign somebody in January, and we know it won't be Semenyo now, where would you know, you don't have to give me a name, but maybe give me three. As a fan, I sort of feel like Conor Gallagher, because we spoke to him in the summer and may have spoken again. Ruben Neves feels a little bit to me like a bit of a smokescreen because he doesn't fit the profile. He's going to be 29 in March. I'd like him, but I don't think United want to buy people over 27. Some people are even talking about Sergio Ramos, which sounds incredible to me. Where do you think is possible? Also taking on board that there might be nobody.
Yeah, and there might be nobody, but again, that just means they're going to go big in the summer on two. And, you know, Elliot Anderson is the most interesting one for the summer, Baleba as well. But Manchester United don't know a price for Baleba, whereas with Elliot Anderson, I think that although there'll be mass competition, the number potentially that he goes for could be really good value, even though Nottingham Forest are going to drive a high bargain. I mean, I can only point to the reporting of others because I've been very clear here that there are variables. But if you look at 3 weeks ago, 120 million, and then 2 weeks ago, there was a piece that said 100 plus million. And then last week, it's 80 to 100 million. And that's a big discrepancy, 80 to 120 million. And if you go with the lower end of that number or thereabouts, that's not bad value when you consider the age and the profile and the kind of player he could be. And I think Manchester United will be in the conversation for Elliot Anderson. But so, for example, will Chelsea and Bayern Munich and maybe Manchester City. And then obviously Baleba, let's just see, because if Elliot Anderson was even 80 million and Carlos Baleba was, let's just call it 100 million, that's a massive outlay. They'll have to decide if they think they can go for both, which is maybe a dream scenario, or if they have to pick one over the other and look for something more economical. For January, I think there's 4 names that we know they like, and we'll have to see how feasible they are. One is Conor Gallagher. As you say, they made a loan bid. Atleti didn't want to sanction it. If their stance softens, Manchester United would be open to a straight loan or a loan with an option to buy. But if Atleti turn around and say we want 40 million euros or more, it becomes a lot more difficult. And because if Man United can find a try before they buy type profile, then after that, they can pivot to other targets and maybe send Gallagher back if they don't want to sign him. But that's a very neat narrative. It just doesn't, unfortunately, factor in Atletico Madrid and their stance, which might be a little bit firmer. So that's number one. Number two is Ruben Neves, 15 million or so in January. A lot of money for a player of his age, but a very experienced player. And as you say, they'd be going a little bit against the model of lowering the average age of the squad, but he's still younger, for example, than Bruno Fernandes and Casemiro. So technically, if you lost one or both of them in the summer, then Neves' arrival would be lowering the average age. I think the only thing that makes me wonder if United would be reticent is that he's free versus 15 million, depending on if you move in the summer or January. And if Al Hilal were prepared to give you some kind of loan with moderate fee and Neves drops his wage, and then you can sign him on a free in the summer, maybe. But if Al Hilal insist on 15 million, I'm not so sure Ineos, looking at that versus waiting until the summer, would necessarily want to pull the trigger. But it is a possibility, and he has been discussed. No approach yet, though, to the player or to Al Hilal. The third name is João Gomez. Sort of mixed messages from sources as to whether United are really intent on moving for the Wolves midfielder. But like Jurgen Strand-Larsen, with Wolves looking goners, there will be suitors that out of opportunism say something might be possible here mid-season, because Wolves know that if/when they go down, they're going to get lowballed for Strand-Larsen and João Gomez in the summer. And the final wildcard name at the moment, anyway, of course it can change, is Tyler Adams. And of all of the midfielders who are spoken about with Manchester United that have big prices and are in form, the vast majority of them are summer or nothing. Certainly with Anderson, almost certainly with Wharton, and almost certainly with Baleba, and very likely with Angelo Stiller. Tyler Adams, you just never know. Obviously, if Bournemouth lose Semenyo as expected, they probably also would point towards the summer for Tyler Adams. But I do think there's a scenario where if an offer is too good to turn down, there's more of a chance for Adams in January than the other long list of players that I've mentioned that are almost exclusively summer. So it's a bit of a dark horse because, again, Semenyo goes, Bournemouth have got money. You would assume that they shut the door on everything, but there's slightly more of a chance that there might be wiggle room for January there. But if you're a betting man, you'd probably still look at that one as being more likely for summer.
And just to go back to Semenyo, you mentioned about the wage structure there. Two things I wanted to ask you really about it. First of all, it feels like Semenyo went to Man City because of trophies. And as you said, he can go straight into the Champions League and trophies. So does that not, is that just United maybe just trying to appeal to some United fans that, hey, we didn't want to break our wage structure for him, so we didn't go for him, when actually, I don't think we're saying that Semenyo would have come to Man United if we'd given him the money, because it doesn't sort of paints him as a mercenary, doesn't it? And I think he's not made that choice. And secondly, I was going to ask as well, is that it now? Semenyo felt like he ticked a lot of boxes. Let's go for it because of the release clause in January. It's not like we've got a desperate need to go and get that player in January now. That probably gets parked until the summer, the attacking player, and Xerxes stays.
Yeah, I mean, Xerxes was never going to have an exit sanctioned anyway, unless they brought in some kind of attack-minded replacement, especially with Mbeumo and Ahmad off at AFCON. I think when people say they don't want to break their wage structure, you have to take those sources at face value and respect that position. But we're not talking about a mid-table Premier League club in terms of budget going up against a big six. So if you look at Man United's current wage structure and Man City's current wage structure, Antoine Semenyo is not going to be the top earner at Man City, and he wouldn't have been the top earner at Manchester United. So the truth is, you don't need to break your wage structure to sign a player like Semenyo. You just have to make him a top 5 or a top 10 earner within your existing wage structure. So sometimes when someone says we won't break our wage structure, it's because the player's asking for something no other player has at the football club. That's not the case with any of the suitors that have tried for Semenyo. Sometimes it's code for another club offered more, and that might be slightly the case with Man City in terms of incentives and bonuses. But again, you can kind of say that if you're Newcastle United or my club, Leicester City, because the highest earners at these clubs, in the case of Newcastle anyway, they're on 100 to 150,000 a week less than some of the big six clubs. So then it would make sense to say we couldn't compete financially. But if Manchester United met Semenyo's terms, which to my knowledge they did, City did, Liverpool did when they first spoke in November, even though they didn't advance it, Chelsea were prepared to as well. All of them are basically just making him a top 5 or a top 10 earner at the club, probably higher to the top than the bottom, but factoring in the fact he's going to be 30 in 5 years' time. So you're not signing a 21-year-old and saying you're basically going to be at the club for life. So I don't think it was really about finances. Semenyo made his decision based on the sporting model, based on the ability to play instant Champions League football, and based on silverware. And Manchester United, to my knowledge, made a competitive offer. And when sources say they weren't prepared to break their wage structure, it's pointing, one, to the fact that these Rashford or Sancho type deals are not just being thrown around like confetti anymore. And it's hinting also maybe at City having more financial power, which is normal because they can offer Champions League. So the City offer will have been higher, but only because Man United, like Chelsea, offer one wage when you're in Champions League, and it diminishes with everybody when they're not, to protect the club financially. So if you say, what would he earn today at Man U versus today at Man City, it's higher at Man City.
Yeah,
but what would he earn if Man United get Champions League next season? Pretty much the same as at Man City. So there's an allusion maybe there to the fact that Man City's offer as of today is higher, but everything was kind of just in the same ballpark. And then where will they turn to? I mean, we know that it's not the number one priority to add a winger, but I do think they would like an attacker and a versatile one, more likely for the summer. And they want a left wing back. I think Semenyo had to be approached in January because of the heavy competition. And the bonus was that he's versatile to cover a lot of different positions. But going forwards, it wouldn't surprise me if they sign a younger winger and then a more experienced left wing back. And instead of it being 165 million Semenyo, it's actually two players, somebody that is potentially a little bit older. And by a little bit older, I mean Semenyo's age, 25 or so, not 19. And you stick them in the left wing back position, knowing that you've got Dorgu and also Diego Leon, who they don't want to stifle his pathway. And then you sign a younger left-right winger. And I suppose this is where the links with Yan Diomande come from. I've been cautioned about Yan Diomande. They've discussed him. Vivell likes him. He's at AFCON at the moment, but I think there's going to be heavy competition. And the biggest issue with Diomande, January definitely, and summer very possibly, is you've got to negotiate with Leipzig, and they always get a premium. So I think given the volume of interest in that player, and given the fact that you're dealing with Leipzig, that's going to be a really expensive deal to get over the line. But it is broadly true that Manchester United are interested.
Yeah. And before we break up for our festivities, I suppose on a reflective point of view, it's been a challenging first year for Amorim. He does have, I believe, about 18 months left on this contract because it was 2.5 years. I think there's a +1. He is going to be in a position in May where technically he's going to go into a final season, which no club ever likes. We've seen that with Pep. We've seen it with Sir Alex. So there is a bit of a decision to make. Obviously, they could just give him the +1. But even then, that you're still extending. Technically, it's what they did with Ten Hag. Is this obviously the feeling with Amorim is they want to stick with him, and everything we've spoken about today sort of suggests that. But there is this precarious next 4 or 5 months. I mean, 7th place in Europa League probably is okay. Anything below that, and there could be jeopardy. But it feels like Ineos want to stick with him, so it's probably going to be more about what fans think.
Yeah, I mean, I've always reported, and I still believe that if Amorim got to the festive period, and this was when we were talking about his job being under threat before the Sunderland game ahead of the October break, and sources had always kind of said, even though at that time Jim Ratcliffe had said 3 years, but some within the club had taken that with a pinch of salt, because no manager at a Big Six club gets a default 3 years if results don't go according to plan. But at that point, I was kind of always told, if he gets to the festive period, he'll get the season because there's enough that they're seeing that they believe constitute progress. But naturally, if they go backwards in the second half of the season instead of forwards, people will still be talking about him being under pressure. They can't have back-to-back seasons finishing in the bottom half of the table and winning nothing. But it's a strange season because, yeah, they're seventh. They're one win away from top four. They're a great festive period away from consolidating a place in the top four. And then everybody will be delighted. And yet, if you didn't know the table and how tight it was, and you said played 17, won 7, drawn 5, lost 5, 28 goals conceded, and then you look at those 28 goals conceded and you go down the table, and I think it's only Bournemouth and Leeds outside of the relegation zone that have got a worse defence, you would start saying, yikes, this isn't good. But it's just that kind of season where everyone other than Arsenal, Man City and Villa is winning one, drawing one, losing one. And as a consequence, if they can string a few results together, the season could have a completely different complexion on it. So I think key to defining their season is being stronger at Old Trafford because they're dropping too many points, tightening up the defence. And if they can beat Newcastle, who are out of form and very ropey on the road, that's a good start. And then you would expect them to beat Wolves at home over the festive period as well. And before you know it, you're ending the new year probably in the top 4 or the top 5. So those 2 games are important. And then I look at mid-January and there's a Manchester derby, and back-to-back against that is an away trip to Arsenal. And that's going to be a test and a chance to show that they can compete with some of the bigger teams in the league. So we're going to know a lot more about this Manchester United side by mid-January. And that's what I mean about leaving the door open to opportunities for Mainoo and potential for signing players mid-season. Because if they get to that Manchester derby on the 17th of January and they're flying, or at the opposite extreme, they're on a lull of form, then there's 2 weeks left of the window to say we're either going to back this manager to get over the line, or we have to back this manager because results aren't good enough. And I think that's why Manchester United's January plans are not entirely set in stone. The official line is it's going to be a quiet month, but results can obviously change that. And right now, there's a lot of unanswered questions about system, about defence, about players that may leave after the summer, about what they'll do if they've shown their hand to have 65 million for Semenyo and not got him. But if you strip all of that away and you just look at the performances, they were really good against Bournemouth, making it even more frustrating they didn't win the game. They were excellent against Aston Villa, making it even more frustrating that they didn't win the game. So on their day, they can get results. The league table looks a little bit underwhelming from about 4th down to about 10th. But that's a good thing for Man United because if they get going, they can climb up it very quickly. So I think at this stage, they're still in contention for Champions League football. And obviously that means that if you're judging Ruben Amorim, you have to say that they're moving up and forwards rather than down and backwards.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's going to be a roller coaster. I think there's, who knows what happens game to game. But I've always said, although some people are Amorim out, some people are firmly Amorim in. For me, it's just give him the season and we'll be in a much better position to verify and evidence where we're heading. And, it is a very congested Premier League season. We could finish 3rd. We could finish 15th. It just depends on what happens. But no, I really appreciate that, Ben. And it does feel like this transfer window, Semenyo would have been a very exciting signing, but it's going to be the latter half of the window where United sort of make their mind up on whether they need to do something. Certainly the message from the fans is for many months is that we need a midfielder, but that's not necessarily going to happen, but could happen.
And I would just sort of close by saying everyone wants something in a window, because if you don't get it, it's like waking up on Christmas Day, going to the tree and there's no presents there. And you're thinking, I'm stuck with the same clothes. I'm stuck with the same socks. I'm stuck with the same food, whatever. But if they wait, and it is an if, and of course it puts more pressure, but if they do nothing and then they pull Baleba Anderson out the bag, then all the people throwing their toys out the pram in January that nobody arrived will suddenly be like, wow, what a plan, what a coup. But it does put more pressure because there are market opportunities now.
You've got to get Europe with what you've got.
So that's going to be interesting because it is hard to think that they'll just stroll in and get Anderson Baleba without another Man City, Liverpool, Chelsea type battle. But if they get Champions League football, we know that they can find budget. We're moving into a new financial model. Man United with Champions League football is one of the most alluring and appealing prospects to any footballer in world football. And that's the kind of thing I think sometimes we forget, that it's really easy for a fan to go, let's look back to the glory years. It's really easy for an owner to go, we want to restore the glory years. But as soon as you get Champions League football, even if you win nothing, even if the project hasn't kicked on that much, to a current footballer, they probably don't care that much about the Sir Alex Ferguson era. They're just thinking, it's Man United. I want to wear that shirt. Now they've got Champions League football. There's no better place that I can go. And it's the same for Chelsea under this ownership compared to Roman Abramovich. So Man United will always be a pull, and especially a pull with Champions League football. So I wouldn't rule out them signing 2 elite, serious midfielders. And again, if they do nothing in January, it's probably because they think all the ones they think they can get and they want and they're going to go big on are available in the summer. But then when they get to the summer, if they haven't got any midfielders by that point and Bruno left or Casemiro left or Mainoo is gone, there's even more pressure and they're going to have to be very effective and decisive in the market. Otherwise, at that point, if they don't bring in the right midfielders across the next 2 windows, that's when the fan base in particular are probably going to start challenging and questioning this ownership and this model.
Yeah, perfect. Well, Ben, Merry Christmas to you from me and everybody at the United Stand and all our community. I'm sure we'll be speaking soon after, and hopefully you can get some rest and respite from what's been a busy year. You've been at the Club World Cup and everything. Yeah,
Club World Cup, Winter Olympics, January transfer window, and then the World Cup next summer. But Merry Christmas to everyone. Happy holidays. And of course, for those of you that struggle during this time, thoughts with those people as well. You're not alone. And please make sure that you reach out to family and friends. But hope everyone has happy holidays and a brilliant new year. And yeah, look forward to speaking when the window is open.
Thanks everyone for watching. Of course, we're back live with the Boxing Day game tomorrow. Smash a like and subscribe. Merry Christmas, and we'll speak to you soon.